And if you notice, the person involved, Larry Lasker?
Larry Lasker.
Larry Lasker is involved with... The Larry Laskers... Okay, everybody shut up now. Larry Lasker, he wrote or produced?
He wrote.
He wrote. And he was also involved in Sneakers.
Yeah, Larry Lasker. I'll be referring to Larry Lasker and to Walter Parks probably through a lot of this.
And Larry...
They both are the screenwriters for War Games and for Sneakers.
And for a while I heard Larry was trying to do a third movie to sort of finish off like a triad of movies that kind of dealt with issues of hacking. I don't know if he's ever written a screenplay, but I heard that several years ago. He came to DEF CON maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and nothing really came of it. But he was wandering around here checking us out. But it's strange that the same guy's involved with 2 of the best movies that depict hacking, and I think that's probably because he focused also on the human element of it more than the super flashy, fly through the air and shoot bullets upside down. So how did he come across you, or how did you two even meet? Tell us a little bit about why you're even qualified to be sitting here.
Okay, that sounds fine. Well, first of all, I'm David Scott Lewis, and I came here just for DEF CON all the way from China. So there's probably be some interesting questions about that as well. China certainly plays an interesting role in this community for various reasons. Let's see. So what happened in my time? I'm 50 years old now. I turned 50 this year. And we actually started working on the screenplay for War Games in the first quarter of '79. So next year would make 30 years where we started actually on the screenplay. And the original idea that Larry and Walter were kicking around was in '78. And it was a little bit of a different model. They were looking for somebody who was a Stephen Hawking with a protege. So that was the original concept. That was something that Larry was really pushing. It had nothing to do with hacking and the original thought that they were going to have. They wanted to have this Stephen Hawking guy who kind of had the unified field theory but couldn't really communicate it. So it would have a protege, young kid, and that's how they were going to take it. So my background prior to that is probably like a lot of people in my age, those of you that are in the 50s or so, you took shop class in your 7th grade. My best shop class was electronics. Took advanced electronics in the 9th grade. Like a lot of you here that, again, in my age group, you have ham radio licenses. You had ham radio licenses. So I was a novice. I was an advanced, had a rig, 2 meters, mostly doing 2 meter stuff. Built a Newtonian 6-inch telescope when I was in the 6th grade. And then, of course, the January '75 issue of Popular Electronics, the one we all know about. Now, back then, I never received Popular Mechanics, but I did receive Popular Science. I used to kind of think that was going to be the future. Now I kind of realize Popular Science is really science fiction that's just sold as science fact. But it was fun. It was inspirational. A lot of these things that turned out to be totally bogus really turned out to be very inspirational for me. So anyway, I had my ham radio going on. This is also during the Apollo program and such, so I got into astronomy at that point. And I can remember exactly what I was doing when Neil Armstrong touched on the moon. Exactly what I was doing when that happened. Exactly when it was and the whole bit. So that's a vivid memory for me. And that had a profound influence on me. 2001 had a bit of an influence on me as well. As you might think. But what was interesting about 2001, when you look back at it, and Arthur C. Clarke being one of the best hard SF writers, but it was basically all wrong. No orbiting weapons platforms, no moon bases, no manned trips or human trips to Jupiter. HAL is probably no closer today than it was back then, and all the astronauts and cosmonauts were white. So think of somebody that was probably one of the best science fiction writers and how wrong he was. Now, so the movie that really I found inspiring, though, even back then, was The Andromeda Strain, even though I had really no interest in molecular biology or biochemistry.
I'd just like to point out that while I lived in Seattle and you guys decided to nuke Las Vegas, I lived in Piedmont, which was the first town to die in Andromeda Strain.
I do remember that. Piedmont, New Mexico, population 68 or something. Yeah. So the Andromeda Strain was more influential on me. I used to read Analog Magazine. Back then, Isaac Asimov didn't have his magazine. So Analog Magazine was my favorite. And that was more of the hard SF magazine, Red Sky and Telescope, of course. Future Shock was probably the most important piece of fiction to me. And again, look back at Future Shock. Toffler was probably 95% wrong in what he said. All right? As a futurist, he just totally blew it, but it was inspirational. So notice that. Popular science, wrong. Inspirational. Future Shock, inspirational, even though they really kind of just missed the mark on what really happened later on. So Larry and Walter were kind of looking for somebody. We had mutual friends of the William Morris Agency. I was raised in Los Angeles. So we had mutual friends of the William Morris Agency. And somebody who was handling one of them, actually the actor Jimmy Cahn's brother, Marty Cahn, his admin was a friend of mine. So they were kind of saying, well, we need somebody that's kind of like into astrophysics. So I happened to be kind of, at that time, into astrophysics. So because they wanted this Stephen Hawking kind of thing. So we met, and I remember the first dinner we had and so on. With my Jennifer, by the way. My Jennifer was actually, oh, by the way, I wasn't the inspiration. And you said John. I was actually the model for David Lightman. And that's probably an important distinction. The inspiration was really this character that never happened, because it was that Stephen Hawking protege that really didn't materialize in the movie. So there really was no inspiration, if you know what I mean, because it didn't really materialize that way. So I was the model for David Lightman, and then together with them, helped them with the screenplay. So we kind of worked out the stories. So anyway, so my Jennifer was with me, and I was with that particular woman for 11 years. We were high school sweethearts, and we were together actually for 11 years. So anyway, so we met, and then I kind of told him about, hey, well, let's look at what we can do breaking into stuff. So I said, well, let's do that, and finding information and so on. So back then, they thought it was a big deal, but I was using Dialogue and Orbit, which were kind of, not too many people were using them back then. I even remember my ID account on Dialogue was like a 10,000, so it was pretty low. So I was using Dialogue and Orbit and BRS and getting all the information. They were pretty amazed that people could even do that. So, and I didn't think it was much of a big deal at all. So, and then just showing them hacking. Now, one difference between myself and David Lightman, I would say a significant difference, is that I wasn't probably as much into gaming. Gaming was important to me, but it wasn't as important as its
driving force.
It wasn't a driving force. I was actually, in high school, I was a member of the United States Strategic Institute, and then the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association, AFCEA, and also the Association of Old Crows, which is the Electronic Warfare Society. There's a long story behind that and what happened and so on. But nevertheless, I was more into defense and what was going on. AFCEA had a fairly active chapter at SAMSO's headquarters, which was in El Segundo in Los Angeles. And guess who the Blue Cube, who they break into in the movie, reports through to SAMSO back then. Okay? So this is all tied in together. Also, the Old Crows was at the old Hughes Aircraft Facility in Culver City. So that was also in Los Angeles. So I was active in all that stuff. So I kind of knew that. So I was kind of like, because I did a ham radio stuff, I had the electronics background. I was getting out the soldering gun and all that kind of stuff and handle it more. So I knew more of the target. And that's one of the things I would emphasize, that David Lightman didn't really know his target that well. I kind of knew the targets, and I was more focused on the targets. So I would say, know thy target. If you're going to hack, obviously, like spear phishing would be one example today. But I mean, in a general sense, really trying to understand that target. So that's kind of where I came from, and that's how I got involved with them in the movie.
And then you would have these conversations, and would they say, would they ask for technical input, or would they just give you big generalities like, do you think it would be possible to break into a defense system? Or would they give you kind of help us draw connected dots to an idea we already have? Using your technical experience to backfill someplace they were going to get to no matter what? Or did you help them get to where they
No,
were?
I helped them get to it. There was a place on Sunset Boulevard, Green Tree Productions is where War Games was originally written. It was originally called The Genius. But that really means nothing, because that would apply to everybody here. That's an IQ of 120 or above. So, that's everybody in this audience. So, but they weren't too good on titles. None of us were too good on titles. So that was the original screenplay. And it was sold to Universal. Universal bought it, and it was problematic. It wasn't easy selling it. And then it was sold to Disney. Disney had no clue what to do with it. And then Disney sold it to MGM, which ultimately made it into the movie. But Universal first bought the screenplay called The Genius. And even I would say, in the original screenplay, you guys would love the original screenplay. I am actually going to ask to see if we can have that just put online, because it's much more accurate in the hacking. John Badham, who was the director, that year also did Blue Thunder. And John Badham likes to sensationalize things. So, and it's a movie too, right? So it has to be a little more sensational than it might be in a book or in a screenplay. So you guys will like the screenplay. The screenplay is dead on the hacking. Okay, there's no question about that. And even where AI and hacking kind of come together, and that's what I'm still involved with. Matter of fact, before I forget, let me I mentioned this to Jeff, that I'm launching a blog in kind of memory of all this, and it's zerodaydefense.net. And I'm really going to be looking at AI meets, and AI in a very generic sense, including genetic algorithms, fuzzy systems, neural nets, meets InfoSec. So it's really a combination of those. So yeah, we actually worked and plotted out the original plot. I thought the original plot that you saw that you ultimately wound up in the movie was too simple. So we pushed this idea of having space-based weapon systems. Now, I realize retrospectively that seems kind of stupid, but if you look back if you think of things in the context of '79, space-based weapon systems were a really hot topic. So it was an area that was this is even before Reagan came in with SDI. It was a very hot topic then. And it was an area that the U.S. was really afraid that we were going to lose to the Soviet Union. So there was a big push for this. But then ultimately the screenplay in that form was just too complicated. It was just, like how do you get David up as an astronaut? It's just like, oh, this is stupid. So it just became too ridiculous, and then it got pretty much where you saw it here, except again on the screenplay it's a lot more accurate, and then Badham dazzled it up.
Would you say the movie Colossus, the Forbin Project, influenced anything?
The Forbin Project, I think, influenced probably them, but that's a really good question, and this has to do with the AI aspect versus the hacking aspect, I think. Larry and Walter had more of an AI aspect to it, and I didn't. I had more of a hacker aspect to it. I was more interested in that than I was in the AI part. They were more interested in the AI part. And I've been very skeptical, and I went to my first HCI conference, I say, before California became a state. So, and I've been very disappointed with AI over the years. And I do see agent-based systems having some validity, and certainly neural controllers and control systems and such. But overall, AI has been overhyped. I mean, way, way, way overhyped. And then I see things like transhumanism now, and the Singularity Institute, and everything that Kurzweil writes. And, and I pretty much say, well, okay, well, maybe it's inspirational. Right. Even if it's totally bogus. It might be inspirational. Just like Popular Science and Future Shock were inspirational to me. They don't have to necessarily be accurate. They can be inspirational. So I didn't really, so the AI part kind of was more their angle. I was more interested in the hacking side.
Right. No, there's a reason I asked about Colossus, because it's one of my favorite series of books and favorite movies, and there seems to be only few seminal points that everybody drew inspiration from, and I thought that was kind of slow for its time. Now in its time it would be incredibly slow, but it dealt with a lot of the same issues. It was the first, I think it was the first movie where a computer becomes intelligent and decides it knows what's best. It's going to take over, control the nuclear systems to basically blackmail the world into peace. This is sort of the opposite, but the same idea with an intelligent computer that knows what's best. So I can't think of where that thread has taken us, but it was definitely, at its time, that seemed to be a very hot concept.
Yeah, the Forbin Project was certainly, I had seen it, but again, it wasn't as influential on me. I think it was very influential on Larry in particular. Not so much Walter. I would say Larry, though, was very influential.
But from there, I don't think we've seen very many super intelligent computer movies. I think that idea, much like the space-based, has kind of faded. Anyway, so that was kind of where we came from. The movie was created. Did you ever think it would be on screen? Did you think it would ever see the day of light?
The first year,
light of day?
Yeah, after we wrote it, it was just like nobody's buying into this thing. And it took a long time by Hollywood standards to get this thing made. So that's why I mentioned when you asked me had I been involved with anything else they've done. And that's when they started writing Sneakers. So about a year after War Games began, the writing of War Games, right about early 1980, they really were just trying to pitch War Games. So they started writing Sneakers. And then they started writing sneakers over at 20th Century Fox. They were at the studios there writing that. So I actually don't remember who made sneakers, whether 20th Century Fox made it or not, but that's where they wrote the screenplay for that. And so I was just a little bit involved with that. That was more of they wanted that to really be more of a physical security movie than it really turned out to be. But it was really more about physical security originally in the concept for sneakers.
So then the movie comes out. What do? Throw a party?
Well, my life kind of went in a different direction. I wound up getting involved with robotics for the biotech industry. So I kind of put a lot of this stuff behind me. And although I always had an interest, I think old hackers never die. They either become marketing or sales guys or technical project leads or managers. But there's no way, I really do think, as I've noticed, it would be tough to compete the 20-somethings. They can just do things tactically that somebody at 50 is not going to really be able to do in general, I think. But then there's different skills you have at a different age. So I kind of put that behind me. And the biotech side in robotics is pretty interesting. Then I sold my soul to the devil and wound up in Samsung as director of strategic planning for AST. For those of you who are old enough to remember AST, yeah, I was director of strategic planning for AST, which basically meant downsizing. So the Koreans told me basically to kill the company with the CEO, and that's what happened. And then I wound up at Microsoft, and then I went from Microsoft.
Wait, isn't that the place you sold your soul to?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Because from Microsoft, I went to Oracle. And I tell people going from Microsoft to Oracle was like going from Christianity to Islam, but I was a nuclear arms jihadist at Oracle. And because Oracle, I was in a great position at Oracle, and the money was unbelievably good. Yeah, and actually, I was at Microsoft and Oracle, both companies, when they reached their all-time stock highs. So the environments were very good. Oracle has a reputation for being very Darwinian, but we had a 5,000 headcount increase while I was at Oracle. So then after Oracle, I was in Microsoft was channels, and Oracle, I was director of e-business at Oracle, the first director of e-business at Oracle. And then I was VP of e-business strategies at the Meta Group. I remember some guy here who was earlier on a panel was with Gartner, but I don't know what level he was at. I was a VP of e-business at Meta, and then, of course, e-business was a 4-letter word. And I was at ground zero during the nuclear winter of Silicon Valley. So that pretty much destroyed my life in 2002. I mean, it's like Murphy's Law was too optimistic. Things went wrong that I couldn't even have imagined went wrong with my life in 2002. So it was kind of a tough recovery period.
So then China.
So everybody wants to know, what brought you to China? That's the question I usually get asked. And here's a great answer, and it's true. It's absolutely true. Online dating. There you go. Somebody was doing something about Adult Friend Finder, but Adult Friend Finder has several other sites. One of them is Asia Friend Finder. And I used that, and I was, the Asians, the Chinese. Well, Asian Friend Finder is like 99% Chinese, because there's a Filipino Friend Finder and a Korean Friend Finder, so they have their own Friend Finders. So it's really 99% Chinese. And my ex is Chinese, so I have just, I guess, kind of an attraction to Chinese women. So this turned out pretty good. I picked the top 5 women I wanted to meet. I had all these frequent flyer miles accumulated from all my travels at Oracle and Microsoft. So I basically called up United Airlines one time. I was living in Silicon Valley then. And I called up United Airlines, said, the next Saturday I want to go. I went to the San Francisco consulate for the Chinese embassy, the Chinese consulate, got my visa, off I went, and pretty much I've been there since. I mean, I literally, within like a week, went to China. I had to come back because it was a 30-day visa, so I came back, did laundry, went back. I mean, that's what you have to do. It takes a little time. For Chinese visas, you have to go so many times before they extend your visa. And then I got sponsored by, and then I had to figure out, what am I going to do in China? What am I going to do in China? So then, because of my background at Oracle and such, I wound up being VP of Biz Dev for the 2 largest Chinese outsourcing companies that are focused on the U.S. One of them went public. They wanted to be the Infosys of China. They didn't quite happen. They have a 100 million market cap, hardly what Infosys is at. But nevertheless, I did that. Out of 2,000 people, there were 20 VPs, and I was the only person not born in China. So it wasn't even, they didn't even have any ethnic Chinese or Taiwanese or Hong Kongese. Everybody was born in China except for me. So that was quite an experience.
How long did it take to learn the language?
I learned about 2 words a year. So I know what I call survival Chinese. I can tell cab drivers how to drive, and I can order in restaurants. And I always have somebody on 24/7 on cell phones to help communicate. And I've been all over the country, 25 software parks in China, the 25 largest software parks. And I actually, if you do a search on my name, David Scott Lewis, you'll see all sorts of stuff, mostly on IT outsourcing in China. I don't really want to be known for that, but it seems that's kind of where I kind of got pigeonholed. So
then one day, you get a call from Wired and they say, hey, it's the 25th year retrospective. What do you have to say for yourself? Or is it more like it came from a different direction?
Well, they actually contacted Larry and Walter, John Badham, the director, Peter Schwartz. Peter Schwartz was very influential to Larry and Walter. Does everybody know who Peter Schwartz is? Peter Schwartz is with the Global Business Network. He was at SRI back then. GBN now is owned by Monitor, which is Michael Porter's operation from the Harvard Business School. He got kind of tied in. You can even, matter of fact, this is actually a good point on how Larry and Walter were thinking about the movie. When they went to SRI, now for those of you over 50, this is a quiz. Who would be the one person you would think of in that time frame from SRI in computer security? I mean, to everybody that was in InfoSec back then, he was on your mind. There were two people in the whole world that you'd know, and he's one of the two. Okay, Don Parker. And then the other one was Willis Ware at the Rand Corporation. Well, Willis was close by because Larry lived in Santa Monica, and so did Walter. Lived in Westwood back then. Yeah, he lived in Westwood back then. So they were pretty close. So they did a lot with Willis Ware at the Rand Corporation. And I think Willis was probably their key kind of setting a framework for what could be done. Whereas I'm the guy that kind of said, this is how the kid should react and what he should do and how he would hack. So, and then Duncan Wilmore, the guy that you see in the movie, he's the guy that doesn't lock out. He locks out the missiles. He was their key consultant from the military. He was the Air Force liaison at the Federal Building on Wilshire Boulevard in L.A. So he got actually a part in the movie, and he was pretty instrumental from that part of the movie.
So then, but Wired, how did the article come about?
Oh, so Wired. So the guy who wrote it, Scott Brown, contacted them in May, and Larry, I haven't seen Larry since October 2004 when I was back from a trip from China. And he changed his email address, and so I couldn't find him, and just tried different things, didn't bounced and so on. So but I still know his phone number by memory. I mean, I even gave you his phone number. But they somehow he found me. The guy I'm pretty easy to find on the internet if you use my full name. So he just tracked me down, and he tracked me down in early June and wanted me in the article. So yeah, there's only a few people in the article. As I said, the directors, myself, Larry and Walter, Peter Schwartz, because he was kind of giving that philosophical perspective to things. Kevin Mitnick is quoted. I don't know why. Captain Crunch is quoted. I don't know why. And then the other person that's quoted is the head of the Air Force Cyber Security Space Command or something. The new one. Yeah. And he was also quoted in the Wired article as well. Matter of fact, what's funny is, just a little aside, is that NORAD is actually back then was very tiny. I mean, it was like a little cave. And after seeing War Games, they said, that's what we want. So they made it. Now it looks like War Games. Or so I'm told. I haven't been there since. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
If you can pay the hazmat bill. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the background. That's how we got here. I'd like to open it up for any questions. And Priest is the first one with his hand up.
Did you ever read The Adolescence of P1?
The question is, did you ever read The Adolescence of P1?
Jeez. Okay. This is like I must have paid you to ask this because I forgot this. Because remember, it was in the notes I sent to you.
We were thinking who to pay to ask questions.
Yeah, it was in the notes I sent to you. The Adolescence of P1 had to be the most influential piece of fiction that I ever read. And if you haven't read it, buy it. I don't know how you can get it. I still have a copy.
Priest has it pirated on priestwares.com.
We can do it in China.
No.
priest is stalking him.
That's a scary thought.
Scary.
Life except 10 years after you. What was your thoughts on the pretense of the book P1, of Adolescence P1, in terms of the evolution of machine intelligence?
Okay. As far as the movie, I didn't even know there was a movie. No, I never even saw the movie, so I've only read the book. I thought the premises were okay for back then, because back then, remember, we were living in an age of HAL. So we're having adolescents of P1 kind of competing against the HAL 9000. So in that sense, it seemed more realistic than. Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was. Well, think about just software agents. Okay, so in essence, the adolescence of P1, and the software agents get smarter and smarter. So, yeah, and and learning.
You don't think that, say, the Demon Seed movie wasn't a better biological imperative of the computer?
Yeah, so if you haven't read it, so I would, that was just an absolutely wonderful book. Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because I totally forgot about that. Adolescence P1, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, please.
I don't think you explained any of your exploits or hacking that you did.
So the question was, can you explain a bit of his hacking skills and what inspired the movie?
Yes, most of the stuff was, well, one thing is that back then, I remember there was a session today where he talked about the top words and such, and it was really easy back then. So, I mean, people really were dumb. And the way they used the passwords, like pencil, and they showed pencil here, it was that easy to get into things. So if you were doing war dialing, of course we didn't call it war dialing then. War dialing came from the movie War Games, okay, the etymology of the word. But maybe DEF CON came from War Games. Anyways, so it was very easy. So getting into the passwords, as long as you could get in and make the modem connection, was not very difficult at all. Then some of my stuff was related to DoD, but let's say in cooperation with, rather than against. So it was in cooperation with. Now also there's certain things I can't talk about because of where I live. Okay? So that's just, it's not benefit. Plus also, honestly, that stuff is a long time ago. So from a perspective of using the internet today for what we're doing and penetrations and such, it's a whole different reality.
But I mean, would you say something?
Oh, by the way, one thing I got to say, because I got to say this, is that Captain Crunch is here. He'll get pissed off, and some people that are really heavy and freakers will get pissed off at this. But I got to say, I always felt that was just a tool. It was more of a trick. Well, more even of a trick. You know, doing freaking was a trick. Doing war dialing was a trick. It wasn't, to me, it was just the point of
the end game.
The end game was the hacking. It was just a matter of getting you to the point. And I was really surprised that Captain Crunch, I mean, he's a good self-promoter. I mean, he's good at that. John's good at that. And I think, and just in 2600 magazine and all that, it's just, I don't know. That did surprise me that became such a big deal. And now you look today, does anybody care? I mean, certainly the magazine exists. I don't care.
Well, now you've got VoIP connections for free. So
yeah.
what's
So
the
I mean,
point?
what a whole different world. Yeah. No, there was a lot more hacking in the screenplay. Oh, let me repeat the question. So I guess to paraphrase, the hacking was shown, the movie kind of goes off in a different direction, didn't seem to be totally consistent in what's being shown. I would say that the screenplay is consistent. The screenplay is very consistent. Matter of fact, there's no stupid whopper in the screenplay. It's PSYOP. It's the Strategic Integrated Operating Plan, which is still the war plan for the United States in the event of a global thermonuclear conflict. Okay, and that's what we called it. Okay, and we just had that kind of computer. Yeah, it was put into a computer, which is based on a model on a Cray. Remember, we're looking in the time frame of early 80s. So or CDC or whatever, your big one of those Minneapolis companies that was in the supercomputing business, which of course don't exist for the most part. So So anyways, the screenplay was really much more accurate in what it was showing and how to get there. And Sneakers, I thought, in some ways did a better job of showing some of that. Although Sneakers had, I think, a lot of other issues with it.
Yeah, people actually got shot in that movie. In Sneakers, that was just kind of off on a whole nother tangent.
Yeah, Larry and Walter will tell you this, and because they've told me this. They love doing war games. War games was, and one thing I would say, I noticed here, and they talked about this, all of us, I think, share a deep passion for what we're doing and for all of this. And they had a passion for war games, too. Sneakers was a job. Larry and Walter, if you ask them that, they'll just say to you, Sneakers was a job. Some of the actors that were in there, we won't mention names, were kind of a pain in the ass to work with for Sneakers. And that wasn't the case with War Games. War Games, there were issues because they got kicked off the movie with a director, and then they replaced the director with Badham. So there was a time frame there where they were actually off War Games, but that didn't last long. But War Games was a passion for them, for all of us, and Sneakers was really just a job.
The question over here with the lady.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I can't find one in Vegas. It seems like nobody reads in Vegas.
We've got a couple other
CDs.
We have some other DVDs as well that we're going to have him sign at the end.
To do that. Yeah.
If War Games was to be remade today, what would you see as the future that you'd like to see in that film?
Re-envisioning War Games today.
Boy. One of the things I want to say when we're all done with the questions, I want to float a movie idea to you that I've discussed with Larry. We haven't discussed this with Walter yet. But Walter is now kind of independent and would have time to act, and certainly has the clout with his credentials to put something together. So I'll kind of address your question when I give you the movie pitch, because I think that answers your question.
And there was a gentleman over here.
Yeah, okay,
the question is, why do the UIs suck in almost every movie, and they re-envision them to be? Yeah, is it they have to simplify to such a basic point so the viewer can only read one line? That's all they get.
Yeah, that's probably one of my pet peeves too. You see 3D visualization, immersive VR. And we know what it's like. Right. We're on command lines, and they're doing immersive VR. What a disconnect from reality of hacking, right? I mean,
we're a dial up in there at Lawnmower Man.
Yeah, it's just stupid. Yeah, Lawnmower Man. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just goofy stuff. Yeah, I think it's just bogus. But if I look at what would happen with War Games, like you notice that they had the speech synthesis. Now, who has speech synthesis here? Okay, to do when they're doing your hack, nobody does that. But of course, it's a cute movie ploy, and and that I don't think was so bad, right? Because it's just.
Well, I think then that's like he had a Heath kit and he was showing off his latest build, and
I didn't think that was so bad as when you get into the immersive VR and you're moving things. Oh, that's just so stupid. Yeah, so I don't like that stuff either.
Now, after the movie Hackers got hacked, I did end up talking to the producer. The writer. And he was actually happy that it got hacked. And he was saying that the reason they had all that crazy flyby visuals is that they spent so much time trying to watch real hackers, and they couldn't find a way to portray like 22 hours of people with no sleep and Mountain Dew. And they're like, well, we were going to fast forward through all this stuff and show clocks spinning. And like, no, that's not going to work. And they tried a million different ideas, and they figured it's a new movie. We'll just go in a completely different direction. We'll just do this weird psycho visual flyby. And that was their way of trying to show time, space, difficulty, and commitment. Didn't really work. People derided that. But they at least tried to show a different direction of how do you portray intellectual activity without putting people to sleep.
And again, that's a movie ploy. So I understand why it's done. I don't particularly like it, and it certainly gives an inaccurate view of how we actually do things. But I do understand that from that perspective.
There's another gentleman back here, I believe, had a question. No? Anybody over here?
Okay, how about the China? I got to tell the China angle, though, before I tell the pitch.
Okay, China angle first, then pitch.
Yeah, then the pitch. So the China angle always comes up. What's going on? And I'm going to kind of summarize this. Now, the caveat is I have been affiliated with Tsinghua University. I still am, actually. If you go on, the company StarTechGlobal.com. They're actually the outsourcing operation for Tsinghua. Tsinghua is the MIT of China. Most of the major leadership in China at this time went to Tsinghua, including President Hu Jintao. That's not true in 2012, which is where the movie comes in. They're going to have a completely different leadership in 2012. So China is going to be a very interesting country to watch, especially in 2012. Not this Olympics. Forget the Olympics. 2012 is going to be the time. So with China and the hacking situation, there's the Dark Visitor. Is the Dark Visitor here? The guy who writes the Dark Visitor blog, there is a blog that covers it a little bit. I was with some DOE guys because my day job these days is in the solar industry. And we have a Spanish company. We're raising about 5 to 10 million euros in Hong Kong, and I spend about a fourth of my time in Hong Kong, about 7 to 10 days a month in Hong Kong. And I live in a city called Qingdao, which is in between Beijing and Shanghai. And we actually will have the sailing events and the windsurfing for the Olympics. Actually, the Olympics this year is in several cities in China, not just in Beijing. They did it kind of differently. So, things will be done by China, but it's not clear when I talk to my DOE contacts that whether they're being set up, whether we're seeing how much they can actually get. Obviously, do we do it to them? The Chinese press would never report that. Okay, so it's probably like a cat and mouse game that's played both ways. So to what extent it's done, who knows? The key area is on asymmetric warfare. The Chinese realize that if they do come to battle with us, and hopefully that will never happen, but if that happens, or with Al-Qaeda, asymmetric warfare is critical because it's hard to beat the U.S. One-on-one militarily, we're basically impossible to beat. So you have to use asymmetric warfare. Information warfare is a key component of that. So if you can, and of course Al-Qaeda, we all know Al-Qaeda is very good at hacking, okay, and very good at using exploits and such. So, and recruiting. So all of this is occurring, and China's, I think, following along really in no different way than most other countries, including the United States, are following relative to who they may view as potential adversaries. So I'm not, I write for the Letter of China column for the Sandhill Group and for Always On Network, and I can be pretty critical of China, but I can also be, I think I'm pretty objective too. And the current leadership's pretty good. You have to understand they're going through there's a lot of chaos in the country. It's, I tell people when I fly from the United States to China, it's like going through a wormhole, and I don't go to a different country, I go to a different planet. Because the way we reason it's different there. I tell people it's a great way. You're married. Okay, I'm married. Anybody that's married, don't. Oh, great. Don't try to understand your wife. Just learn to accept your wife, and that's what it really is like in China. Just learn to accept what happens. You kind of predict the guy's going to drive, the cab driver's going to use the sidewalk to save time, so you better move out of the way. Just all sorts of goofy things. Oh, I got to tell you two quick China stories that are just great because they're good to laugh at. In the winter, this one was best winter story. This last winter, your car has trouble starting, right? How do you get your engine block warmed up? Easy. Get a pile of bushes, get brushed together, light it on fire, and stick it underneath your engine block. Okay? And when it happened, when I was with an American visitor this year, I didn't even pay attention to it. So it shows that maybe I've been in China too long because it didn't even faze me. And then the other one this year, the funny one this year that we're seeing more of is that there's more and more Western toilets coming in. And they actually have instructions on what to do. And the instructions are, don't stand on the rim. And the other one is, don't face the plunger. Because if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Face the plunger. If you're going one way, just do that. So, it's different. It's really, but one thing I can say is there's dynamism in China. It feels like 1999 in Silicon Valley. There's a dynamism, and there's a lot of nationalism. That's the downside. But you'll also see, I'm not too worried about it. The Chinese are, you'll see the mother who is dressed in her Mao outfit with her daughter who's drop-dead gorgeous, wearing short shorts, and the latest fashions and makeup, and it's absolutely hilarious. And this has only happened now in the last couple of years in China, where you see the mom's still dressed like in the Cultural Revolution, and the daughter's just hot.
So how's the Great Firewall of China treating you?
The Great Firewall of China, first of all, I tell everybody you got a VPN. Right? So you have to get a VPN to get around, otherwise you're just stuck. You're really hosed, especially with blogs. So you really don't have any choice. I think most of us use Whitopia. So because that's probably the best cost benefit. Some people use Tor, but Tor from China, it's as slow as mud. So using Tor from China is pretty bad. Now Anchor Free, some people are using Anchor Free. Now they're trying to use that, so that gets them around. They get their stupid little advertisements, but that's okay. They don't use it often. It's more in Starbucks. The Starbucks they're all free Wi-Fi, so they do that. There's Starbucks, by the way, and Pizza Hut in China are much, much better than here. Just no comparison. No comparison. They're nice. They're really nice. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't hear a word you're saying. Could you maybe come up?
Said the media coverage during the earthquake was very open.
Yes, it was open primarily because of what just happened prior to the problems in one of their neighbors. So that was one of the reasons. Also, Wen Jiabao really took charge of this operation, and he's really good. Wen Jiabao is quite good. Hu Jintao is pretty good, but Wen Jiabao, they're lucky. They have the two top guys are technocrats, and China needs technocrats. The guys coming in at 2012 are attorneys. Oh God, the downfall of China. So who knows? But they speak English, and they spent time in the States, so we'll have to see what happens. I'm sorry, say what? Are there any big disadvantages to living in China? I tell people that if there is a purgatory, I hope I'm getting credit for time lived in China. So I would say there's lots of disadvantages to living in China. Food, for one thing. Just the food, you can't. I crave an In-N-Out burger when I come back. Just certain things like that. And culturally, it's just, the nightclubs are good. The nightclubs are pretty good. There's techno, ambient, trance in the nightclubs and so on. And that's kind of good. They actually have floors that move because they joke that that's the only way you can get Chinese people to dance. So you actually have floors that it's pretty funny. So and they do dance but you can't. You're all kind of squeezed together. So yeah, there's lots of disadvantages. That's a whole story.
I need your opinion on this one. I was reading a pre-Olympic story, and they're talking about these chefs that go over to China and they check out the local markets because they want to cook fresh for their teams from their country, and they analyze a chicken wing that could feed a family of 10. I don't know a chicken wing that can be that big. And if you eat it, you'll test positive for steroids. Does that have you seen the super chicken?
Yeah, well, okay. The super chicken. Food stuff and pharmaceuticals are a key problem. I don't want to turn this into a China talk because that would be easy to do. And it probably might be more interesting too. But foodstuffs and pharmaceuticals are a huge problem for Chinese. And because we know, and that's a huge concern for the foreigners living there, because we know we get junk. We know, matter of fact, the Sichuan earthquake, the reason there were a lot of deaths, in all likelihood, was because the materials used were substandard. They weren't what was contracted. Now, one could argue, if you look at Transparency International, India and China are among the two most corrupt countries in the world. But the one difference is, if your brother-in-law in China, you give him money to build a road, you'll have a road. If your brother-in-law in India, you give him money, you probably won't have a road. So, the corruption is more efficient in China. But still, they're substandard things. People in cash flow, businesses run in China on cash flow. They run on razor-thin margins. So any little thing they can cut, they will. And even when we do business in China, we're a Spanish company, so I can say this. I'm not obligated to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the United States. We have to pay our salespeople to give them bribe money to the purchasing people who we know are then going to give a kickback to our sales guy. That's doing business in China. And it's, why should our way be right? We're in a different country. We're in a different culture. My wife thinks it's going to take 2 to 3 generations before it's going to change. And it isn't just about IP. Huawei is generally regarded, okay, I'll legally make that claim, generally regarded as basically having ripped off Cisco technology to create their company. Now Huawei sues their former Chinese, their Chinese employees who have left that rip off their technology. And so it isn't just against Western firms, it's against each other. If you've got an idea, an IP, it's mine too. We're a collective nation. So that's just a cultural thing that's going to take time to change. There was a question, I think, over here.
Okay, and then we'll go to your movie pitch.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, sir? Yep.
No, I have not, and I really don't have a lot of interest seeing it. I had zero involvement. I saw the trailer for it, and it, just like the Andromeda Strain, I think this year in the States had a...
Oh, boo.
Oh, man. When I saw what it was like, I said, I don't even want to see this. I just want to have...
Those sort of in-name only movies.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. So, no, I haven't seen it, and if you give me a free DVD, I may consider... Well, you know, it is funny, yeah. The DVDs, we pay 7 kwai, so that's about $1 for a DVD. But you want to know something, though? And this is in the defense of China. We wouldn't know where to buy a legal DVD. So, like people say, you know, what are you going to do? And it's like, you can't buy legal DVDs. You have to pay $1 to get your illegal DVD.
Damn it.
Damn it, yeah, really. What are you going to do? Because we'll get bored. We only have one English channel. So that's Channel 9, and that's CCTV, and it's mostly kind of like CNN, the Chinese version of CNN. So, you know, that gets a little...
Like White Devil is having heavy rain in Northern California.
Yeah. And then Channel 5 is the sports channel, which is basically soccer and basketball, which I don't particularly care for either, so...
Okay, movie idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's toss this out. And I wanted to put this on my laptop just so I don't forget anything. So let me just read it to you. If you like it, hey, we might actually have this as a movie. And if you don't like it, well, then I guess we'll let it die. Basic plot. It's trying to bring in some different types of elements into the plot. So it's a covert Interpol operation in China to thwart Russian organized crime elements working with Al-Qaeda in China. Al-Qaeda does exist in China. Okay? Matter of fact, the main reason that the Tibetans will not get more independence is because of Al-Qaeda. And you never hear that from the Western media, do you? Because if they give it to the Tibetans, they've got to give it to the Uyghurs. And if they give it to the Uyghurs, who are all Muslim, it's not going to happen. Okay? I actually support Beijing's position on Tibet. I think they're a little heavy-handed, but overall I understand why they cannot give Tibet because the Tibetan Buddhists want democracy. That's not viable in China now. Okay? You have to live there and see. They would vote for a Hitler too in China. If you had the villagers and the citizens and the way they operate and such, you could convince the poor people with the big income disparities that there are in China to vote for a Hitler. That's not in our best interest, and it's not in their best interest. Okay, you have to really understand and see on ground level what's happening in China. But anyway, let's go back to this. So, Russian organized crime, hacker types, right? And now they want to figure out, hey, I need to do something with the money. Hey, this Xinjiang province, Xinjiang Autonomous Region, which is Uyghurs, Muslims, there's Al-Qaeda elements there. You may have heard about this last week, actually. The PLA went in and wiped out one group, and they did that about 6 months ago. The PLA doesn't screw around. When they go in there, they just blow them away. Okay, there's no like civil rights. We're going to read you or put you in Gitmo. We're just going to kill you all. Okay, so the PLA is pretty strong with them, and same with other Muslim extremists in the region. So this takes place in 2012 when there's new leadership in China. The new leadership has found evidence of corruption, which is a huge problem, and they can't really trust who they can really go to really solve this problem. Because there's this independence movement in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, the Uyghurs, just like in Tibet now. So they request a covert operation by Interpol. So the bad guys are the Russian organized crime and Al-Qaeda in China. The good guys, guess what? It's David Lightman at 50 years old. But we'll take this further. And there's going to be 3 different other types, too. There would be a white Silicon Valley hacker, a Chinese hacker from Beijing, and a beautiful Indian hacker from Bangalore, female hacker from Bangalore. Yeah, maybe. We haven't thought that through yet. So the Silicon Valley, Chinese and Indian hackers in their mid to late 20s, and Lightman's been living in China for 5 years, out of Interpol for the past 10. He's being recruited for the special assignment, kind of just to lead this team of younger hackers. Most of the action takes place in Shanghai. I thought MI3 did a horrible job in showing Shanghai. Mission Impossible 3 just did an awful job in showing Shanghai. So I was very disappointed with that. Show more scenes in Shanghai with additional locations kind of in that James Bond kind of thing, with Moscow, Urumqi, which is where the Uyghurs would be primarily, Mountain View, Silicon Valley, Beijing, Bangalore, Dubai, and Hong Kong, primarily Dubai and Hong Kong for money laundering stuff. So the bad guys are using the internet for various nefarious acts, and an attack's planned on Shanghai during a SCO meeting. That's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is Russia, China, a few other countries. But most of the action really takes place on the internet. And then there's a bombing plan for the SCO meeting to try to get independence for the Xinjiang Autonomous Region. APEC holds a meeting. We'll try to work that in and explain it in easy ways. And what's in it for the Russians, as I said, they want the mineral assets in Xinjiang Autonomous Region if it becomes independent. They want it for themselves. So it's really, in simple terms then, it would be Chloe is the good guy. Not Jack Bauer helps Chloe rather than Chloe helping Jack Bauer. So the hero's the Chloe character. And there has to be a Jack Bauer character at the end because there is a bombing plan for Shanghai. But really it's the hackers that really the heroes in this. We've also talked about it from a sense of how much hacking, that there would be more hacking, we would guarantee more hacking than in any hacking movie to date, and it would be realistic. Matter of fact,
would it be fat-free?
Maybe we could even get Jeff. It's like it has to, and Priest, get like a certain criteria. You know, it has to go through a committee to get approved as to the hacking level. We want it to be very accurate as far as the hacking elements concerned.
No, you're going to run into the same problems every movie's had, is how do you visualize that hacking? More than just an Nmap, screen map, and ooh, I'm in.
Well, probably more like 24, except that obviously it won't be that you take 256-bit encryption and figure it out in 3 seconds. So probably not that kind of element that you see in 24, but more of kind of the 24-ish element. I think that the way they show Chloe and her team on 24 does an okay job. They do it things too quickly, as we would all agree. It's too quick. Hey, they only got 24 hours, but that kind of a situation. Because again, it's an Interpol secret operation. So does this? So we're trying to bring in Interpol, more information on Interpol,
but now,
Al Qaeda, the whole bit.
So in war games, the stakes are pretty high. It was the whole world. It was the whole planet. Mm-hmm. In this movie, what's the stakes? What happens if they lose? A bomb goes off in front of a building?
The bomb actually would kill several heads of state because the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in APEC would have world leaders from the U.S., England, basically the G8, many other countries would be there.
So you're going to take out some leaders from other countries.
Yeah, main leaders.
And then will that trigger some other secondary? Russia will get what they want then, or
Russia loses out in this, and other parts of the plot TBD.
Oh, okay.
So it could be. The dirty bomb would be kind of the plot from what was the Tom Clancy movie in the book? The Sum of All Fears. Sum of All Fears. Yeah, I like the book better than the movie, but yeah. That's probably a good question. If you look at a lot of movies, if a lot of movies do have the premise that a major leader is going to die and be assassinated. In this case, you'd have Russia, China, the United States. You'd have major country, India. You'd have all these major countries being killed at once, and the chaos that could possibly cause. Oh, I'm sorry. It was like, why do we care if a foreign leader gets killed or a foreign dignitary? Who needs him? Yeah. I don't know. That's good because we'll need a lot of iteration. Trust me, in war games there were so many iterations that we had to go through and things to think through, and people that we talked with and said, no, you can't do this or that or whatever. As far as plots are too extravagant from a movie production point of view. So I'm sorry. So you were asking. they don't know where the bomb is, and that's what they got to find out. So that has the 24 kind of element to it, where they're trying to find where the device is
So that's
before
how
it goes
you create
off.
the time pressure.
And the David Lightman doesn't really necessarily have to be that way. But David Lightman's become more of the, with Interpol and doing more management rather than actual. That's why the 20-somethings are the real hackers, that he's managing that team.
And David is like an Easter egg. It's just there for us aficionados.
Yeah, kind of. And really to guide the team. It's really to guide the team as to where they should be thinking about things. Just like the blog I'm doing is, I can't write a blog. Nobody needs a new, we don't need a new news blog, right, in this field. We don't need another one. And I'm not going to write tactical exploits. But I'm looking at my blogs really focusing on as an analyst in the meta group. Where do we see things happening over the next 3 to 5 years? Where are the areas that products, ISVs, independent software vendors can develop product? Where are some market needs there? So it's looking more future, a little more in the future, more from a product planning point of view.
Now, do you think it's realistic, though, that China even would call Interpol?
Yes, we think that's very realistic. Oh, really? Yeah. Because China does have some problems with their own internal security, and there's a lack of trust within certain elements in China and the PLA. So to what extent? But that's why we're doing this in 2012, because it's a new leadership. And the new leadership doesn't have the 10 years of establishment. In China, the leadership's for 10 years. It's 5 years pretty much automatically renewed. So, and they leave in 2012.
There are some realistic elements there. I mean, you alluded to the terrorist activity in northwestern China that was reported, last week?
Last week, correct.
About 6 months ago, there were a number of reports that the RDN is migrating to China. Okay? So, the Russian mafia is there already. Build on that.
Yeah, that's exactly in essence what it builds on, and that's why we do it in 2012 in the future. Because right now there technically isn't an Al-Qaeda in China. There's this group that's like this with Al-Qaeda, but they don't use the Al-Qaeda name. We're assuming that in a few years they would be actually like an official part of Al-Qaeda. Yeah.
There's a gentleman back here again.
I'm sorry.
Ethan Twist, he'd have one of the people involved getting paid off by the Russians.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Yeah, that's a good idea.
There's always a twist, though. Oh, yeah.
No, SCO is the Shanghai SCO. Okay. Yeah, I never really made that connection there. Well, Santa Cruz. No, we won't put Santa Cruz or the city or anything in the movie. No, that's a funny point, though. There was another question? I'm sorry, say that again. It's more the realistic vision of Shanghai. If you go to China, Shanghai is not like the rest of China. Neither is Beijing. Beijing's a little bit nationalistic. Shanghai, get this for a fact. 38% of the high school students in Shanghai want to move to the United States. Now, that's not even including all Western countries. That's specifically the United States. 38% want to move to the United States. It's that high. Shanghai is very different than the rest of China. Yeah. And we could show, like, we have the beautiful Indian woman as one of the hackers, but we could show a lot of beautiful women in Shanghai, too. Any other comments? And feel free to contact me or whatever. I'd love to get your ideas as we can try to develop this. It'd be fun to do this. The GA could be a GA SCO meeting. It has to be a SCO meeting because SCO's China and Russia are the two key components of SCO. So rather than APEC, it could be GA. It could be a G8 meeting with SCO. Yeah, that's perfectly viable. Yeah. Yeah, SCO. Well, SCO is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I mean, we can't rename the acronym, but we'll figure out something. Any other questions? By the way, I love 3 Days of the Condor, the next movie that's up. That was actually influential to me as well. That was one of my favorite movies at that time.
The reason why I'm sitting here and Jeff is not is because he's running up to his room to pick up 3 Days of the Condor and come back down. We will be starting that shortly. I think the next thing is you're going to autograph these.
Yeah, I can do
I'm not sure where they're going to go from there. I think Jeff was also checking to see, I don't know if you guys knew this, but Jeff is actually expecting. So there may be a little Jeff on the way soon.
Good. Is that his first? I'll take it. Is that his first?
So we'll be doing the 3 Days of Condor shortly. So I guess, like I said, is there any other questions out there? Or yes, sir. Louder, sir, please.
Get Matthew Broderick to do it? No. Matthew Broderick hasn't aged at all. He couldn't pass for 50. I mean, I don't think I really look 50, but Broderick still looks like he's 30 or something. Yeah. He's about 50 now, maybe 48. Okay,
I guess we're done.
All right, thank you. ZeroDayDefense.net.
Round of applause for him, gentlemen, please.